later. I got married in this church 40 years ago last Saturday.
In this building?
In this building.
No kidding, man.
40 years ago last Saturday, yeah.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you to Roy's wife's younger sister. Now we're connected.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
Younger sister?
Uh-huh.
That means he married the older sister.
No, he married the middle sister. He could have married the older sister, but I can assure you he made a better judgment than me. Just saying. Nothing wrong with the older sister, but I would have opted for the middle one myself. Of course, not including the younger one. From a security perspective, I've been a policeman since 1978 for 41 years. I've done security work for the State Department in 33 countries: Pakistan, Bosnia, Somalia, Yemen, Indonesia, all the stands, mostly Muslim countries. Did the security assessments on both the Kenyan and Tanzania embassies after they got blown short or flat. So I've done a lot of security work, and as I told your board, the most important thing to know is I've got nothing to sell. I won't be coming back here. I'm not going to try to come back and train you and get anything out of you. I'm here because Roy's a friend of mine, my brother-in-law, and he asked me to come do it, and that's it. So, why is that important? Whatever I tell you is what I actually believe. There's no ulterior motive to get you to buy into some plan or a 20-year scheme of training. I've got nothing to sell. So, I attend a good-sized church in Springfield that's got 61 people in security for our South Campus. We roll about 13,000 through every Sunday. But what we do is not inconsistent with what I think makes sense for you, just it's scalable. It's just different in size. The same issues that you have. Check that out. The little remote and everything?
The remote might work, but I would just use the right arrow key on the computer.
Okay, no worries at all. So can you guys see all that? I'll move back here just a little bit. And, probably the simplest thing for tracking me down, Roy's got all my contact info, and you'd be more than welcome to reach out in the future if there's any question or anything that I can help you with. I had a good 1 hour with your board and the pastor, and understand that in the role you and I fulfill in our churches, we literally serve at the pleasure of the board and the pastor. They ultimately are not only spiritual leaders in the church, but they're the business leaders, and a lot of the security stuff has got weird business twists to it. Liability and insurance and risks and things like that. So Roy had asked me just to come kind of talk with you about security. It's my understanding that you're at a stage where you're doing some security, but as far as any formalized plan or process, there's not a lot established. Is that fairly accurate as to what your policies and I'll make it real simple. Are there any written policies whatsoever that you could hold in your hand that speak to security? Okay, that's pretty preliminary then. Because ultimately, what's on the four corners of the paper as to the basic process you do is the only way people really know what the rules are. And this is an important job. I mean, above all else, this is a ministry, and we want to be a welcoming environment for people to worship, but security can be a hindrance to that. And there's things we'll do in security that are not conducive to people being comfortable, like searching bags, if you chose to do that. I'm not going to say anything to you tonight about you have to do this and you have to do that, because the truth is, you'll police the aftermath of whatever you do. And if you raise your hand and say, I disagree with that, I don't mean any disrespect. My response will be, I don't care. It really doesn't matter to me, and I don't mean that disrespectfully. I've had people think they're getting my goat. Oh, we're going to do this and that, and I'm like, bring it. I don't care at all. You think I care that you're going to search every black guy that comes in, but not the white guy? I think it's a bad idea, but if you want to do that, have at it, you know. So the question is our church safe? Are we prepared, or are we unprepared? And the follow-up question is, prepared for what? So let me just give you some philosophical thoughts of mine, and in no way am I representing James River Church, but I can tell you what I'm telling you is what we teach and preach and believe from a security perspective. Again, James River is a big church, second largest assembly church in the world. 4 campuses that will run about 24,000 through on all 4 campuses. But everything I'm going to talk about is, in my mind, scalable to a church of any size. And I don't think we're doing anything different than what, if I move back to Poplar Bluff and attended here, that I would suggest made good sense for you all. Just the whole concept is scalable. So what is the primary mission in a worship environment for security? And in my mind, in James River's mind, it's de-escalation. To try to take an event, decrease the size, scope, or intensity of a problem. And most of the time we can do that through good people skills and strategies, not unique to security, but also policing. We sometimes have to escalate to de-escalate. You sometimes have to step up and stop something before it can get worse. And some people actually struggle with that concept that, well, but we laid hands on someone, we escalated it. Well, we had to escalate it to stop it. And they're not counterintuitive. They actually go kind of hand in hand. So the mission in the worship environment is led by protectors, people that are in that role. And by definition, that's one who protects, a guardian having care of a kingdom. If you're responsible for the care of another, you're a protector. And we take this role in church security very seriously. For it is a ministry for people that understand that 1 out of 3 people today, a New York Times survey done last week, 1 out of 3 people surveyed fear for their safety in a public environment. So people coming to church, there's a significant percentage of folks that come to your church that are looking around. And they may in fact react to that by taking what they see as countermeasures to the threat. Bring guns to church, have strategies for protecting themselves, things that actually make sense on its face, but when we look at your role, they can be counter to what you're trying to get done. I'm old and I forget stuff, so when something comes to mind, I'll just say it. I probably would have said it later, but one of our biggest concerns at our church in security is a big problem developing and other people getting into our business with good intentions and misunderstanding. I mean, what if someone pulls a gun out who's trying to help us? We're wrestling with someone and they don't really have any concept of a force continuum. What is a balanced response? And they pull a gun out. Well, who is that person with a gun out? Now we're trying to figure out who's who in the zoo, and that is also a problem you have right now. You have people coming to church with guns who may have varying degrees of knowledge, skill, ability, and equally important with the skill and ability with the gun is their knowledge about what's right and what's wrong. And the human dynamic, what you bring to a critical incident, is the totality of your knowledge, training, and life experience. And the best analogy I can give you of how that plays out in the physical realm is I'd been a cop here about 8 months, and I was fingerprinting a prisoner and drunk driver who'd given me no grief at all, and in the middle of me rolling his fingerprints without any warning, he just spits in my face. I mean, right dead on in the middle of my face. Re-handcuffed him, sat him down, cleaned up, ended up taking him off to the Butler County Jail, and I meet my dad for breakfast at Sambo's. That dates me, doesn't it? I meet him at Sambo's for breakfast, and we're eating away, and he goes, "How was work last night?" I said, "I had a guy spit right in my face." He never even looks up. He goes, "Did you take your baton and cave in his skull?" I said, "No, I would have." And I said, "I know, Dad. Policeman, gas jobber, you sell gasoline for a living, you know." But what's the point? It was reasonable for him that now would he really have killed the guy? No, but I think he'd have taken a stick and hit him on the head, you know. But that's what you're going to be dealing with. Schoolyard rules with your fellow worshipers if something breaks that. As a protector, you have a responsibility to prepare in advance for what you're likely to face. So if you're assuming the role of a protector in a church environment, what are you protecting against? And so I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but for most people in church security today, in the early stages of it, if you ask them what they're protecting against, they would tell you this. We're worried about someone coming here with a gun and shooting this place to pieces. And I get that. That is, I mean, when bad things happen, like what we've had in recent months, I get emails, I get calls, "Oh, you know, we need to ramp up our armed security, and I get that, but that's what most people think about. But the first thing to understand in your role is assessing accurately what the risk really is and putting that into proper context. So how significant is the risk? Washington Post went from 1999, looked at schools and churches, and there's lots of other public shootings, but these are really the most prominent. You hear about repetitive, repeating. 220 school shootings since 1999 in Columbine, 18 church shootings in that same time frame. And you might say that really surprises you. It seems like there have been a lot more. But church shootings are statistically very, very rare. Other causes of death, I mean, the chance of you being killed in a mass shooting, period, independent of a school, just a mass shooting, is 1 in 11,125. If we take all mass shootings in their totality, if you just do churches, 378,000 congregations in the U.S., the probability of a shooting ever happening in this church is 1 in 126,000. The chance of you actually being in a service in one of those shootings is 1 in 6.5 million when you count churches and then the number of services. So in consideration of this, does it even make sense to commit the time, energy, money to prepare it? And I've spoken to a lot of groups over the years, and there are some people that when you actually peel the layer of the onion back on the real risk, we're a small church and it just doesn't make any sense for us. The insurance is going to go up, and I have no heartburn with that whatsoever. So if you're thinking it's just about shootings, it really isn't. And in fact, we've never had a shooting at James River, but we scuffle with people quite frequently. We arrest people out. Arrested one Monday at the church. Wait, no services on Monday, right? Because 2 out of 3 times you have a violent incident in your church, it will not be during a service. It'll be when you turn away someone that you didn't give enough gas money to. Does that make sense? It's not what people think. They think church security, service, shootings, and that's statistically not what happens. Church security decisions for most congregations are based on what? For most, it's frequency or likelihood of an incident occurring and then impact. So it's kind of like in law enforcement. Statistically, hostage takings are very, very, very rare. In Springfield, I ran a full-time SWAT team for 7 years. We had no other duties, 10-hour training day a week, 300 search warrants a year. I had 7 hostage takings in the entire time I had the team. Very, very rare, okay? Wow. So why did we commit so much time and energy to training for hostage rescue? Because the impact is so high. So you now make decisions based on what are we likely to face day in, day out. And what you're likely to face here is a tug of war over a kid, a domestic argument, a drunk person coming into church. So we'll think about security based on frequency, but we'll also think about impact. If it's 1 in 6.5 million chances of you ending up in a service with a shooter, I promise you that anybody actually in a shooting takes no comfort in those statistics. Doesn't mean anything to them. So what's that mean? It means impact is relevant, and we have to consider the cost of doing something compared to the cost of doing nothing. And I don't mean cost in money. When you talk about the cost of a security program, in my mind, it is almost always a moral and ethical focus. Do people who come to Westside to worship, is it reasonable for them to think they come to this environment and feel as though there has been thought given to their safety? That they can come and worship and not be looking over their shoulder? Is that reasonable? And I certainly think it is. There's a cost in an environment where people don't feel safe. And you talk about ultimately being a welcoming environment. You're not welcoming if people don't feel safe. The likelihood of something happening here is low, but the impact, if something does occur, is significant, and many believe that we are obligated biblically to plan and prepare to act in defense of the flock. I'll mention to you, though, that in contrast with that, there are people who believe that even doing what you're doing and talking about having a security plan that maybe involves people with firearms, that is actually demonstrating a lack of faith. And I'm not going to argue with them about that. But I've had people in large groups like you sitting on the front row ready to fight with me and argue. Well, if you had faith, you wouldn't, and I'm like, fine. So when you leave here today, don't buckle your seatbelt and don't look right or left when you pull out in the road. If you have faith, God will surely protect you. Don't stop for red lights. Just run right through them. So where does that mentality end? I'm not going to argue with someone about it, but just be aware, it would not surprise me at all if, as the church moves forward, because some of the security process will involve educating people. If you decide to start tossing bags, if you decide to start telling people formally, if you're not on our security team, we don't want you bringing a gun here. It makes their job harder. If something, well, how am I going to protect myself? That's fine. But if we know it, you won't be here. Because we have insurance issues and we have a trained security staff. We don't want them, God forbid something happen, to be confused on who you are. That whole education process may result in having someone, well, why do we even have security here? And I think it's a fair question. I mean, some people will argue with you, and the best answer for you guys would be, because pastor and the board want one. Any questions? If you don't like that, you can argue with them or you can go to another church. That's kind of how that usually works out. 1 in 3 adults who fear a shooting, as I just mentioned. Measuring the cost of doing something versus nothing. Simplified liability from a church perspective can be broken down into what's reasonably anticipated and whether you had a duty to act. And you might, well, golly, how are we talking about legal stuff in the church? And Samaritan's Purse right now, Billy Graham's ministry, is being sued over having one of their missionaries, a girl who was kidnapped in Sudan. And if that case goes south on them, it will likely bankrupt Samaritan's Purse. And so, literally, understanding where you are vulnerable. For example, if the pastor said, hey, it's Southern Missouri and you got a Second Amendment right, y'all bring guns, it's all good. And someone drops a gun in the bathroom and it goes off and shoots somebody, you guys are done. I mean, you think we're all friends here, but I can tell you, when somebody gets hurt, the gloves come off. And if your goal is to have ministry here, you need to have your doors open. And there is consideration to what happens in the real world financially. And Samaritan's Purse, I'm telling you how significant that deal is. Convoy of Hope is in Springfield. I've been a board member of Project Hope in Springfield since the early 2000s. We run about 60 mission teams a year to Haiti and Nicaragua. I had a team for a week in June. I had a team for a week in July that I took to Haiti. We're teaming partners with Convoy. When Samaritan got sued, about a week later, I get a call from Randy Rich, their number 2 guy, and he says, our insurance carrier just announced that we have to have an outside objective assessment of all 7 of our international programs, or they won't keep insuring us. So in the following 6 months, me and Randy flew to Haiti, we flew to El Salvador, we flew to Nicaragua, we flew to Tanzania, we flew to Ethiopia, we flew to Kenya, and we flew to Uganda. And I did a written, formal security assessment on their biggest 7 international ministries so they could keep their doors open because their insurer wasn't going to cover them. And I made a bunch of changes. They were doing a bunch of things that were really, really dangerous. I mean, the big issue in the Samaritan's Purse deal is this girl was grabbed and they had her for 36 hours and nobody knew she was even gone. So literally the first place we flew to was Tanzania, and I sat down with their local staff first day and said, tomorrow when you're going to go out and do what you do, if someone grabbed you, when would someone start looking for you? And they're like, I guess the next day when we all came into work. So the first thing we changed in all their programs was nobody just goes and drives around for Convoy of Hope anymore. They have to have communication processes, and we know where you are and where you're supposed to be so that you can't get grabbed off the street. So this kind of stuff has meaning. And so for us to be liable for something, we have to understand what's reasonably anticipated. Well, what can we reasonably anticipate here? Well, you can sit around with a piece of paper and a pencil. Could we have a drunk person come in here? Could we have a person on drugs come in here? Could we have a domestic dispute that turns violent? Yes, yes. You just walk down the list and you'll come up with a list. It's not going to be as voluminous as you think. It'll be about 20 things that are problematic and likely. And you might say, well, we'll just call the cops. Remember this, when seconds count, the cops are minutes away. It will never get here in time. Never. The Dayton shooter killed 9 people in 31 seconds. 31 seconds, policemen were shooting at him. Less than a minute, killed 9 people. So that was a frigging miracle that there were cops working on the same block he was on. Your average response time to a 911 help to the Poplar Bluff Police Department will be around 6 minutes. Guaranteed, around 6 minutes. So you're on your own. What are we up against? And do we have a duty to act? Well, I don't know. Does this church have a duty to take reasonable steps to make the place safe? I can assure you Jasper Edmondson and the other plaintiffs' lawyers in this town will all say, oh, yes, you do. And if you don't, we'll just see in court. And that's how it works out. Problems, challenges. First, historically not security conscious. Churches are all about getting people saved. And many of us, me included, we cringe when we think about a business connotation with the church. But that's just not real world. There's a business side to this. And being security conscious is a part of it. Image conscious. One of the biggest sources of friction you're going to have here, because we have it at James River, is the board and pastor wanting things done in a way that, when I say image, I don't mean that in a way that lacks humility. They want this to be a welcoming environment, and that's image. If you're standing at the door with rifles slung and your body cavity searching everyone that comes in here, that is not going to fit into their image. So you'll have friction there. We have it at James River almost weekly. Pastor and I kayak together. We're friends, and I've ended up being that weird conduit, and I have a good relationship with our paid lady who's overall security, and it could be uncomfortable because he won't call her. And I've told him, Pastor, you need to call Linda. Oh, no, I just, So he runs stuff through me all the time, and there's headbutting. There is. I'm like, well, if we're not standing next to you when the prayer for the sick occurs, when 400 or 500 people every Sunday morning come to the front, someone will lop your head off and put it in your wife's purse before I can intervene. Well, but it's not all about me. Okay. That's fine. I mean, that's kind of how this works. So, image. They're going to want this to be a welcoming environment, balancing that with legitimate safety concerns. And that's just the way the world goes around. Financial considerations. The single best thing you could do from a safety and security perspective would be to hire off-duty Poplar Bluff policemen in plain clothes who get the worship environment you want to create. That's not going to happen, I can tell you right now, for a number of reasons. But that would be the best, because a lot of the liability would get dumped off on a commissioned police officer. There's things a commissioned police officer can get away with that you as private citizens can't. But that's not the way the world goes around. The other financial considerations for real for you all will be training. If the decision is made to arm people, that's not going to happen for free. Most churches don't make the volunteers pay for their ammunition. How do you communicate? Radios are the answer, and I'm not talking about Walmart $19 radios. I'm talking about radios you can actually talk on and hear when the music and worship's going on, and that costs money. Again, it's scalable. You can do it with a standard UHF radio here. We have to have 2 repeaters on our south campus. Repeaters were $18,000 each because we're in this massive 388,000 square foot facility made of concrete and steel. It's like 15 Walmarts. And so you're going to have to spend some money. Insurance, that's just the reality of how it works. The insurance carrier, you have to have insurance, I think, and you'll have some insurance carriers that will balk at having civilians armed. Or we had it 10 years ago when we did the transition to allow civilians to carry guns. And we had to meet certain standards the insurance company gave us. Bottom line is, if you're authorized to carry a gun at James River Security, your training will meet or exceed the Missouri standard for a police officer. So the idea, I'm a CCW guy, I'm good to go, that does not fly at James River. You shoot 4 times a year, and you actually have to qualify. And we do force-on-force stuff. We do, about half of us are police officers, so we do training for the civilians that is exactly what police officers get because our insurance carrier required it. Litigation concerns, personal and corporate. This is when you all can get up and walk out of the room. When I say it, normally the color drains from their face. What would the church do? And this is the kind of thing, and I'm glad we've had some board members because it's a board decision. One of you gets sued for a security function. Does the church pay for your lawyer? And I'm not going to put them on the spot, but that is a business decision that has to be made. And I can tell you right now, if you get involved in a scuffle with a man and woman fighting over a kid, and you lay hands on somebody, the chance of them not suing you is very, very low, in my opinion. Very low. Well, but I didn't do anything wrong. That's got nothing to do with getting sued. You'll get to go hire a lawyer for $300 an hour and work your way through the system. And you may win, but you may have to get a second mortgage on your house. So no one really thinks about that. I just wanted to volunteer for security. Well, you may get to lose your house over it because there's personal liability. Now, that's where policies come in. You don't, unless you're Roy, don't have deep pockets. Okay? If you don't have deep pockets, and most of us don't, they will sue you, but they really want them. And the way they'll get to them is by them not preparing you. No policies, no training. They were negligent by entrusting you with a role you weren't trained or equipped to do. So it's in their best interest to make sure you have policies, rules, training, but it's in your best interest as well. But if I was going to be in security here, it's not like any other role in the church. You could be vulnerable. You could be doing kids' church, and a kid could fall and bump their head, and you could be sued. That's actually very, very, very rare. But people, when you lay hands on people in America, they're going to grouse. And so the security group needs to, through your insurance carrier, figure out, okay, if we act within the scope of what management wants us to do, will we be covered? Now, to be clear, you can't be getting rogue out there. If you pull out a stick and crack somebody on the head because they're mouthing you, the church is going to say, that's beyond the scope of what we empowered you to do. It works both ways. In most cases, you will have support if you're acting within the scope of your role. But that doesn't mean you can stray off the reservation and expect them to support you. In fact, that's the best way. Most of my real work today is police legal defense. I've got about 25 open cases right now. I defended Darren Wilson in the Ferguson case, stuff like that. And I'm quick to point out to an agency getting sued, if an officer's done something absolutely inappropriate, I said, you just got to sever from them. You're not responsible. I'm talking really crazy crap. I had a case in East St. Louis where an officer goes in on a burglary call and he sexually gropes the victim. And the agency's getting sued. And I said, this is not a problem for you at all. What do you mean? That's a crime. He's going to get prosecuted for that. You need to fire him and just tell them, hey, I'm really sorry that happened to you. That's not a police problem. He chose to commit a crime. And so we got to be together on this because it benefits management, it benefits you. Startup assets, personnel, and equipment, what do you buy? I mean, for example, if you chose to allow armed people, are you going to buy their guns? I mean, that's the kind of, and James River does not. We've never gone that route, and we've never had a problem with that. But and again, you might think, good grief, is that like, a mini fiefdom there? Well, we tell you what gun you got to carry, and we tell you what kind of holster you got to have, and we tell you what kind of handcuffs and magazines you got to have, and we inspect you every Sunday. We'll look at your stuff every Sunday. So we'll make you do certain things, and no disrespect, if that doesn't work for you, if you can't buy a Glock 19, if all you can carry is an RG-14, then you need to go be security at some other church. Because we're not going to let you carry a German-made 22 that's worth $40. We're not going to let you do that. Training needed, personnel, time, and money. How do you get to this point where we have a reasonable degree of comfort that if this happens, then you're in a position to make the right decision? It all takes time and energy. So we're here today to help you make decisions concerning your transition. I'm not here to tell you do this, do that, do the other, because truthfully, you will be stuck with what you do. And because of that, you'd better be happy with what you tell people to do. And some of what we may do in Springfield, you might say, we really don't want to look in bags. Looking in bags is very, very difficult. People don't like that. And so what do I mean by that? We don't search ladies' purses. We search bags that need searching. We search bags that have no business coming in this church. What's in that bag? I don't know. Let's see. I put a lot of stuff in there. Oh, just if I empty it all out, you're going to be stunned. That's my Sunday church bag right there. Every service, that's what I'm carrying with me. We're here to help you make decisions. That's the bottom line. And so some things are very, very controversial. People don't like their bag searched. And we talk with pastor and staff. You can do whatever you want, but anything you plan on doing in the future that is obviously going to ruffle some feathers, you need to think long and hard about how you communicate it in advance. People are really, really open right now, and it's just the nature of how human beings are. When bad things happen, they're willing to give up some of their freedom and their rights, good, bad, or otherwise. If you today put out an email or whatever method you communicate, or even from the podium, the pastor says, hey, there's no reason anybody needs to bring a backpack into this church. And for your safety, if you do, we've asked security to look in those bags. And if you won't allow it, they're going to ask you to leave. That's just where we're at. It's 2019. Interesting side note, guess who won't search any of those bags? Any commissioned police officer. We've got Fourth Amendment concerns that you as a private citizen don't have. It goes both ways. You can get away with searching somebody in ways that I can't. And so by policy, none of the commissioned cops at James River search bags, because there is case law that comes with when a police officer under color of law can look through someone's bag. These are the things you got to maneuver through. So what is the recourse? And we have it happen every Sunday. Hey, I'm Steve Ijames with security. We've got a policy here about large bags for safety of everyone. I need to take a look in your bag to make sure there's nothing there. I don't want you looking in my bag. Hey, no worries. It's not a problem. You can't stay, but you need to head on out to the car. But it's all good. I'm not going to force you, but we'll look in that bag or you'll have to leave. And most people, okay, fine, whatever. We tag them with a color. I'll show you some pictures in a minute of a briefing. I just took them Sunday knowing I was coming over. This shows what the bag tag color is for the day. So if you see somebody with a bag and you can see it's got a red piping on it, you know it's been checked. All of that is a part of what we do. Planning in advance, why? Allows us to have a well thought out process, is most likely to yield positive results. Objective response based on training policies and protocols can be defended. A subjective reaction is less effective, occurs with no or minimal planning in advance. Literally flying by the seat of your pants. And I mentioned earlier that the issue of hair-raising decisions are best made when the hair is not raised. When you're sitting around with cool heads. I'm going to show you just some slides. If you're in security and this happened, not to put anybody on the spot or uncomfortable, but to say, here's the good news. I'm going to show you some things you're going to go, oh, good grief. I don't know what I do. Good. So we're going to send that one up to management. What would you have us do? And quite often it's a pastoral decision, because a lot of it's going to be not gunplay. It's going to be challenging the message. We've had people at James River stand up and challenge the pastor right in the middle of the sermon. Argue with him. What do you do? So the time to figure that out is not when it happens. The time to figure it out as best we can is now. A prudent person, according to Proverbs, foresees danger and takes precaution. The simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. That's what we're talking about. We look at making this a welcoming worship environment and recognize that you guys have a lot of good things going on here, and I think James River has a lot of good things going on here. Satan is not ignorant of that. And I'm telling you, a dead church, a church that had nothing going on, the only worry you got about violence there is people within your own staff killing each other. You're a target because you've got good things going on here. And I mean, that's the way the world goes around. And so we have to foresee risk and plan for it. So structure considerations. Will you use law enforcement, civilian volunteers, or a combination? Are there commissioned police officers that attend here? How many?
not like they're scheduled in here. We have a certain number. Or
Right, no, but I mean, how many just attenders do you have that are police officers?
4 that are.
Okay. That would be an excellent beginning. Now, they can tell you no, but to reach out to them and say, we are trying to develop a security program that will make this a safe worship environment, and we'd like to reach out to you guys to help us, or you girls to help us. There's reasons, and not every police officer is great, I'll tell you that, but there are reasons, and you'll get that in a minute, why if they are a squared away police officer, they are a tremendous, tremendous asset. And I'll cover that in a second. But you've got to make a decision on what you're going to do. Utilizing those who understand safety and security must be accomplished without compromising the core mission. We've removed many people from security over the years with a lot of hard feelings because they just can't get over the fact that they're not SEAL Team 6. And we're not Delta Force, and we're not the Secret Service. And in fact, honestly, I'll just be candid. Those who really want to carry a gun in this church worry me. So you want the core mission to override all the rest of the volunteer groups here, whether it's kitchen, whether it's children, whether it's security. The core mission has got to be a welcoming worship environment. And you'll have some people in security, some police officers that can't separate it. Some police officers that don't get that this is not the time to be McGruff the dog. No, exactly. And so I'm not saying all police officers are great. And it becomes very touchy in the church environment where you, for example, decided, well, we know John Jones from PBPD, but we don't want him. I would just encourage you to be able to talk about articulable facts as to why, hey, you're probably a great cop, but I just can't have you standing there in the front glaring at people in the back. I just can't have it. And so that is definitely a concern and an issue. Existing congregation members are hiring off-duty personnel. Again, it's all scalable. We have 12 uniformed Ozark officers at every service. They mostly do traffic control. They have their vehicles there. We have none in the auditorium. That would actually be better from a safety perspective, but the image thing, pastors, no way, no how. You're not going to put uniformed cops in our sanctuary. You're not going to do it. To which our response is, okay, you're the boss. But we've had them drag people out. I mean, the reason the cops are so beneficial is everybody in security knows our policy is if you're not a commissioned police officer, unless you are stopping violence, you don't lay hands on anybody. You don't touch anybody. We'll call the cops. So if someone's standing there running their mouth and threatening and all that, you just stand there and take it until the cop gets there. Now, we've got cops on campus. That'd be a little tougher for you all, but literally, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words, just let them run their mouth and call the cops. Because if you lay hands on them, it's going to get problematic for you. And in the end, that hurts the core mission. It becomes a news story, and depending on who comes in here and probes you and gives you grief, whether we're talking some transgender group or we've had all of this at James River. They come in with their video friends, and they are looking to go to YouTube. They are looking to sue you. So we've got to be aware of that. It's never what it really appears to be. It almost always has some underlying motivation trying to draw you in. Volunteers are a very effective option if they are properly trained and selected based on background checks and looking for those with a servant's heart and a warrior mindset. Those who are there to serve, but if things go loud, they're able to get in the fight. The inherent dilemma with civilians, it's present in policing too, but in law enforcement, almost everybody gets tested. Most civilians don't ever get tested. And so sometimes you find out by default that they're not good to go. It's just the nature of human beings. In law enforcement, most in a town that's busy at all, and believe it or not, I was a cop here 3.5 years. It was a rough place to be a policeman. I got in a shooting 18 months after I was here. I had a guy try to kill me at Northtown Beer Stop. Had already shot the clerk. I shoot him to keep him from shooting me. Little Poplar Bluff. This is a rough town. I guarantee you there's no cop in this department that's not been in a bunch of fights. They've all dealt with physical trouble people in this town. This town's a rough little town. Most civilians have never experienced that. What they would really do if somebody popped them in the face. And that's, you get that with a police officer that has been tested. With a civilian, you really don't get it. Law enforcement brings generally, professional training capability, and this one right here is hugely important, with additional resources at their disposal. Depending on how you structure with the cops, when Drury University, where I got my bachelor's, my son played basketball there, the vice president of Drury is a friend of mine, and about 15 years ago she called me and said, hey, we're thinking about paying, partnering with the city. We got 36 cops on Missouri State campus that Missouri State pays for. Full time, the police force at Missouri State is all SPD, and Drury was thinking about doing that. Much smaller university, and she called and said, what do you think? You know, it's expensive, we got to pay for their car, we got to do all this stuff. And I said, Julie, here's the one thing that is priceless. When that cop keys that radio up and says help at Drury, they will get every Springfield police officer coming. So you can't put a value on what that is. So if you end up with officers partnering here, when they dial 911, you'll get the cops. And I'm telling you that's important. And they'll look favorably on you. A lot of things are judgment calls. That coin flip will almost always go in your direction. My dad used to run the penny pincher. He's been dead since 92, over on 67. And he would give the cops free drinks. And one day I said, what's up with that deal? Because my dad was not Mr. Benevolent. He said, I don't really care about you guys getting free drinks or not. He said, I just want your cops to think well of me. If I call for help, I want them to come. If I give them free drinks, I said, you're basically bribing him. He said, basically, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'd give them free food if I thought they'd come faster. So officers, depending on how you scale it, they might have a police vehicle here. That's why we do Ozark the way we do. That police vehicle sitting there, for many people, especially a mentally deranged person, that's a deterrent. If you got a person that's thinking about an easy target, they see a cop car, it might turn them away. They're going to have pepper spray, they're going to have tasers. We'll talk about that for you all, civilians as well. Less lethal options are very, very valuable. But the cops have definitely got it. Direct communication with on-duty personnel. Many off-duty officers are covered under work comp. Another reason we want a Springfield police officer off-duty who comes on duty to do police becomes completely covered by our pension system. So if I'm off-duty and I get in a fight doing police work at James River Church, I'm on duty, my pension covers me, my work comp covers me. One of your civilians get hurt, you can't go to work the lumberyard tomorrow. Lumberyard doesn't care about that. They want you to come to work. There's complications with civilians. Typically, law enforcement has a higher degree of voluntary compliance than security personnel volunteers. You know, it's just it happens all the time. We'll have somebody maybe a little bit drunk at a church service, and one of our plainclothes security people will be standing there saying, sir, da, da, da. Who are you? You can't make me do anything. And then I'll be standing there and I'll go, handcuffs come with me. Maybe not with him, but you'll come with me in a cage car. That's how it works. Oh, okay. You get more compliance if they think you can actually do something to them. Civilian volunteers, armed or unarmed. A leadership decision, 110%. That's it. I'll just leave it at that. What threat are you wanting to protect against? If a lethal response is a threat you want to guard against, that only happens with armed people. The cops will never get here. So I'm not saying you should do guns or not do guns. I'm just saying if part of the security role in your mind, however statistically rare, is an armed threat, then you have to have guns. There's really no other way to get the job done. Liabilities and risks with civilians. I've already covered some of those. It's just what comes with the limited training. I mean, you could be trained. You're never in your lifetime going to get to the scale of a police officer that's been through a 1,000-hour police academy. So you're always going to have a little more liability, but that's why we would, through policy and training, greatly limit and scale what you would do that could make the church and you vulnerable. Does that make sense? If somebody's slashing people with a knife and you shoot them, no worries. I guarantee you. If something really big happens, you're going to be fine. Where you're going to get jammed up is on something minor. It really is. I mean, I've had people tell me a long time in my police career, if you shoot and kill somebody in law enforcement, you're going to get sued. That's untrue. That's what I do for a living. 99% of my time is defend police officers in legal cases. If a police officer kills an armed criminal, they'll get sued about 20% of the time. The lawsuits you're seeing all over America are these, I thought he had a gun, or I shot him with a taser and he died. It's these weird hokey deals. If you all get involved with a genuine bad guy that's armed, you not only won't have trouble, you'll get an award for it. That's how it really works in the real world. Your risk is going to be way weirder. It's going to be the husband and wife fighting over a kid, and you get it wrong. Which one do you let leave with them? That's where you really, really get in trouble. Up-to-date training. You've got to figure out what you're up against reasonably, and then preparing your people through training to meet the need. That's the bottom line, and it is a complicated, challenging process. Under the heading of armed or unarmed, if you're using cops, unarmed is not an option. I've had some churches who've made the decision to go unarmed, and then they try to tell their law enforcement volunteers they can't carry a gun. And for most officers, that by policy won't work, but just understand if you have police officers, you definitely want to authorize them to carry guns. Unarmed is better than nothing. They will not be able to respond effectively or at all to a high-risk incident. Here's the bottom line of my thoughts on guns. They're like a parachute. If you need one and don't have it, you're never going to need it again. That's how it works. And so you can do whatever you want with that. Civilian armed, I'm not going to read, I'm just going to tell you the law. If church leadership authorizes you, you can carry a gun here. If you just read the statute on its face and don't dig deep, you'll read no guns in churches. But there are exceptions to all of that. And you can't do it without the consent of the minister or person/persons representing the organization. That would be your board. So is that a in writing thing? It doesn't have to be anywhere near that formal. What needs to be understood is that if you are on the security team and you have met the standards of training set forth by the church, that allows you to carry a gun. There's no, oh, do you have a certificate? It's nothing like that at all. This is basically so that the prosecutor knows you've met the statute. And all the church has to say is, Roy's a member of security, he's been through our training, so he's good. We don't have to do anything formal. Likewise, consent of the pastor can open up the church to legal liability. So if you are a security person who's been through training, and you go into the bathroom and you drop your gun that goes off and shoots somebody, is the church going to get drug into that? They are. They are. I mean, well, but that wasn't what we taught him to do. No, it was an accident. It's below the standard of care. It's negligent to drop your gun. The church is going to get sued for that, along with you. So, well, we have people, I mean, we've found guns on the hook in the bathroom more times than I can tell you. And I'll tell you, a group that does that all the time is the Sky Marshals. They leave guns in bathrooms on airplanes all the time. Pilots leave them. Pilots are allowed to carry guns on planes, and they'll leave them in the bathroom too. So, again, I'm just giving a little bit of relevance to the conflict and competing priorities for board members and for pastors. Yeah, we want to have this to be safe, but we're not without risk here. So, if that's true, they absolutely would want to be really wise in who they allowed to carry and why. Because truthfully, the way things are now with these plaintiffs' lawyers, they've really figured out ways to get under people's skin. They used to just sue everybody professionally. We sue the church. We sue the board as a church entity. In about half the cases I have today, from LAPD to NYPD, they're now suing the officer professionally and personally. And they quite often sue their spouse. What did my wife have to do with it? Nothing. But you're going to get to litigate that anyway. The reason being, it strongly motivates you to tell your insurance company or lawyer, settle this thing. Make this thing go away. My wife has to come give a deposition. She can't sleep nights worrying about it. They make it as crazy on you as they can. And it makes it difficult in some cases for insurance to be obtained. You absolutely can shop for insurance who will insure you reasonably with armed civilians. We've reached that point in the U.S. It wasn't always that way. I forget, I'm old, but I told the board this. I'll tell you guys, if you say I've already told you the story, just tell me. But about 10 years ago, we made the decision at James River to transition from cops only to properly trained civilians. Our number 2 guy is Kirk Parsley, and he called me and said, hey, the board decided they're going to go ahead and let civilians in security carry guns. What do you think of that? And I gave him my normal response. I said, I don't care. Doesn't matter to me, Kurt. Oh, okay, that's simple, huh? Yeah, it's all good by me. What's our insurance carrier say? He goes, don't know. I said, how about this? Call them and then call me back and we'll continue this conversation. About an hour later, he called. Hey, he said, I called our insurance company and they are right as rain. They said they didn't mind. They said they're going to cancel our insurance, but they said they're right as rain. And we had a big laugh about it. So he said, yeah, we don't care if you carry guns. We just won't insure you anymore. Oh, so how do we get over that stumbling block? We reached an agreement that we would have people qualified to the level at or exceeding a police officer, and that satisfied them. So there's ways to make that work out for you in the long run just fine. CCW training is a minimal check the box. It's no longer required under Missouri law. CCW training is probably a little beneficial to you from a liability perspective, personal liability. If you choose to carry a gun for your own or family's defense, I would encourage you to get a CCW training certificate because it's just a little more if you get sued. But as far as preparing you to do church security, it's not worth the paper it's written on. It's got nothing to do with how church security works. It literally was meant to check a box on a Missouri statute when it was required. Additional training over and above that is highly recommended. Most insurance companies will make it a requirement. Now, you may get a stunner. You may call, it's all good. All right. I've never seen that, but it could happen. CCW training is not to prepare you to deal with an armed adversary and a large group of people and all the complications that come with it. Any training decision should be based on the following question. What is the task or event we're preparing for? Is the training solution you're considering adequate to the task you're asked to perform? That's a federal court case that is the standard. Literally, is your training up to the standard of what you need to accomplish the task? So, just think firearms in general. What kind of firearms training would you do? So, I'll get more on that in just a minute. Do you only want a presence of your security for services and events or whenever the doors are open? Again, you're a smaller church, but your risk statistically is greater outside of service hours of someone getting hurt. So that's a board decision. I'm not saying you got to have security here every day. What could you do reasonably? I don't know what you do now, but for example, you can't have your doors unlocked. If you have a secretary or church staff here, a person can't just walk in off the street. You have to maintain a level of due diligence to protect them. If, unfortunately, your board is now on notice, because I've told them that statistically the risk is greater for an injury outside of services. So that doesn't mean they should be banging their knees together. It means they should be thinking, it's not about getting sued, it's about making our place safe for our staff. So effective today, you can't just walk in this place. We'll have a buzzer outside or whatever, but the ladies or whoever's here Monday through Friday, they go, oh, okay, can I help you? And they have the right to not let somebody in. I hate to say this, but a lot of the benevolence ministry is spooky. Why is that? Because poor people are spooky? No. They're mostly mentally ill. They're mostly self-medicated or a combination of all the above. And they're problematic. We arrested one Monday at James River who we allow them to use our shower facilities. So we're like a homeless spa. And one of them broke bad Monday. Wasn't happy with one thing or the other and threatened our staff, and Ozark Police took him off to jail. So services only whenever the doors are open. It doesn't mean you have to have security here, but you got to have an understanding of the risk. Are we teaching our folks to be camera friendly as it relates to force? Use of physical force is statistically rare, not likely, and should be a last resort. I mean, truthfully, in law enforcement, we just have to be reasonable. And as Roy can tell you, most cops won't take a lot of crap from you. If it steps across a physical line, you're going to the deck hard. That's not the way this works for you and me. It's not the way church security works. We need to consider the mission. It's completely different. And so we need to be thinking how we teach people to do what they do in a manner that is as camera friendly as it can be. And keep in mind that many of the people who would test you or cause you grief will do so with friends videoing. So it's gonna be on a camera, so we have to actually think and teach control techniques and stuff that reduce the ability for folks to say we're violent, over the top. Doesn't mean we're not going to control people if we have to, but it's not like teaching police officers because we don't really care. I mean, I don't like it when things look bad on TV, but if that's what it takes to make me safe and get you in handcuffs, I don't really care. Well, you need to care because it's a completely different mission. Less lethal force options. If you're talking guns, would it be reasonable to talk other stuff? And the answer is absolutely. In fact, if you choose to carry a gun personally, you're making a huge mistake to not have an intermediate weapon of some kind with you, because you almost never will need the gun. You almost always would need something to get an aggressive beggar on the Walmart parking lot to get away from you and your wife. And if all you've got is your gun, I mean, I've just worked a lot of cases over the years where someone who hadn't really thought through this process, I've been a cop here about a year. I'm at B and Bartlett. Car drives by me, no license plates. Pull this car over. I can't tell you what I had for breakfast, but I can tell you the guy's name. Jimmy Van Lewis was his name. Great big black guy. I walked up and said, "Did you see your driver's license?" He said, "I ain't got one." "You don't?" "I'm revoked. From Poplar Bluff, we arrested you for being revoked." I said, "Get out of the car, you're under arrest." He gets out of the car. I said, "Turn around and put your hands behind your back." He said, "I ain't going to do it." Been a cop about 10 months. In 1978, under Missouri law, you had to get at least 120 hours of training in your first year. I had had 3 days of riding in a car with a guy some of you may know, Tony Wallace. Tony was my field training officer, and Tony was the best. He had not prepared me for that. I hadn't been at the High Patrol Academy yet. So I'm just a dumb Poplar Bluff High School graduate, went 2 years to Arkansas State to pole vault, and now I'm standing at B and Bartlett with a guy that outweighed about 150 pounds. I said, "I'm not going to tell you again, turn around, put your hands behind your back. I ain't going to do it." Put your hands behind your back. And he goes, "White bread, what are you going to do with that gun?" I said, "I'm going to kill you with it." And he said, "We both know you ain't going to do that." And I put that gun back in its holster where it belongs, and I went. And he smiled at me and turned around and did this. He taught me a lesson. At that day and time in Poplar Bluff, Missouri, I had my gun, a baton, and a dumb look on my face. That was it. No taser, no spray. I didn't really have any intermediate weapons to speak of, and he demonstrated graphically how wrong I was. So if you're not even in security, but you decided to carry a gun, you better be thinking about pepper spray. And pepper spray is phenomenal. It really, really is. If you shoot a guy right in the eyes without any warning, it's a tough customer that can hang in there. I'm just telling you, I've been sprayed 1,000,000 times. It is bad, bad, bad. What about for security? We don't allow it at James River inside the building. Our parking lot people are issued it. Why not in the building? It can induce panic, stampeding people. All you got to do is Google pepper spray stampede deaths, and you'll read about nightclubs and other places where security sprayed pepper spray and people are choking, and they will stamp on a baby's neck to get out and get air. So it is prohibited inside the building. But our parking lot people can carry it. We have all kinds of crap in the parking lot. We do a deal called Bags by the Bumper once a month. We run a huge food pantry out of our facility, which brings in every derelict you can imagine. But once a month, you bring in bags from your house full of groceries and you set them behind your bumper. And our golf cart guys go and pick them up. 2 years ago, our parking lot guys were like, and we're thinking, not like we're super hyper vigilant paranoid, but a U-Haul truck pulls on the lot during first service, and thinking bomb or something, Anyway, they're like, "Hey, we got a U-Haul truck coming on here." Oh, good grief. They're stealing our groceries. So this guy and his girlfriend are going along, throwing the bags of groceries in the back. And they're like, "Okay, we got to stop them." So they pull over there in our security vehicle, and the guy tries to run them over. So Ozark PD chases them. End up chasing them all the way to Springfield, spiking them, flattening their tires, and arresting them and taking them to jail. But we have it on the parking lot because you got an open air environment. So less lethal options. If you're talking guns for security, we need to talk about some other things as well. Besides the obvious benefit, if you have a drunk in here that's squaring off wanting to fight with people, leave your gun in the holster, please. Just pepper spray it. If you have to do something like that, It's better than, what do I do? But that requires training, planning. James River has tasers. We have civilians carrying tasers on every shift. We've never shot anybody with it, but I've got a buddy that teaches at Stratago, is a company that does church security in Kansas City. I've got one of his videos where a civilian security officer you know the place in Kansas City that does House of Prayer, does 24-hour a day prayer. You can show up and they've got live praise and worship 7 days a week, 24 hours a day at House of Prayer. And I've got a video of one of their security guys tasing a drunk who's trying to fight with people. And so why would you do that, have tasers? Because if you've got a problem and the cops aren't there, you've got to deal with it. Training is not about just the technical or mechanical aspects. For example, we can teach a monkey to shoot a gun. It's not about the technical, mechanical part. It's about the decision making. And we run, in our training scenarios, the weekend of September 12th and 13th is it's Friday all day, Saturday all day. Every security person from all 4 of our campuses, 3 in Springfield, 1 in Joplin, every officer, mandatory attendance at our campground at Mountain Grove. Got 400 acres. It's got bunks, the whole deal, cafeteria. They'll get 2 days of role-playing training that weekend. And it'll be all kinds of scenarios. And we do shoot, don't shoot stuff. We have foam batons. We have inert tasers. They'll make decisions in scenarios we think they're going to face, and they have to do that once a year. That's independent of shooting 4 times. So what is adequate training? For many, they think, okay, we're going to qualify you with a gun. I'm not trying to trick anybody, but if that's the firearms training that you do, and you're authorized by management, and something happens, and you shoot in the sanctuary and miss and hit somebody, do you think anybody will challenge the validity of that training? Is that reflective of what you're likely to face? That's why you have to do shooting like this. That's why you have to create an environment that is as close to replicating the task at hand. Nothing wrong with square range shooting to learn fundamentals. But when it comes down to qualifying, we have to put you in an environment, not about liability. It's about helping you make the tough call. And a square range looks nothing like that sanctuary. So you have to come up with other things that allow you to accomplish the objective in a more practical way. So civilian volunteers are what most people do. You've got to really guard against who puts in for this. I mean, I joked earlier with your board, everyone wants to be a lion until it comes to doing lion stuff. And you'll either get people that will way overreact, or you'll get people that when it comes right down to mixing it up, they don't have it in them. And there's a consequence to what happens when you protect. I love this picture. This is from Ireland, and this is a sheepdog that has successfully fought off a lion, a bobcat, a big bobcat. And so here comes the little sheep to console him. He's covered in blood. If one of your people ends up having to do something significant, it will be at a cost. And we've got to think about that, the psychology of who would do this role and how well they could hang in if something really bad happened. And that it's not for everybody. And again, I would just caution you about the people that are the most zealous about doing it. Quite often, they're all hat, no cattle, as they say. And it's hard to tell them no, but you can usually figure it out in practical scenarios. And it's hard feelings. I mean, you want to be kind, but when you have people that don't make the right decisions in practical exercises, they got to go. And I'm not talking about Spider-Man dropping out of the ceiling and no-win scenarios. I'll give you an example. It was very, very humbling for our guy that's overtraining. 6 or 7 years ago, we have a 15-minute in-service training every shift. So our meeting for the first service starts at 8 because the service starts at 9. You get there at 8:45 and there's 15 minutes of training. It's just a refresher on this policy, that policy. And so I'm in that first service. There's about 20 of us there. And Bob, our guy that's doing training, said, hey, everybody get up. Our in-service scenario is going to be down here. And it was very humbling, and it's bad sometimes when you think you've got a pretty good program and then somebody throws a beta test on you, and everybody just fails miserably. But I'm not saying but I was the only policeman working that shift, and I think that's relevant. We're walking to go to where Bob is leading us, and he's leading us. Church is 45 or an hour and 15 minutes away. As we're walking through the atrium, there's a man and woman sitting on the couch, and they're arguing. It's not a loud argument, but they clearly are arguing. And the security team, 1, 2, 3, 4, they all walk by him. And I stop. Hey, how you doing? What's going on here? Steve Ijames, working security. Can I help you guys? And Bob just stops everybody and says, that's the training right there. He's just shaking his head. He said, what? And everybody's like, well, I thought we were, they just walked right by a couple. Now, you're allowed to be a couple and talk, but they were above that threshold. They were clearly arguing, and we expect security to stop. And don't move. I was like, hey, what's going on? Can I help you? Well, we're just, and they played the role for about 10 seconds. Bob just stopped and he just called it and said, that was the training, and boy, did we fail that one. So, anyway, we've got to try to find the right people. Hair-raising events are best assessed when the hair's not up. We've got to think, what are we up against? Arguments are very, very common. Do we want people to intervene? Is it any of our business? And we frequently have people that if I would stop and say, hey, can I help you? No, none of your business. Actually, it is my business. I'm in security. This is a welcoming, worshiping environment. And I know how I've been married 40 years, but you can't sit here in the atrium and have a yelling fight. It's just not going to happen. So it is my business. And our default is always, if you want to do this, you can do it off our property. Or we can help you. I'll get and we always default to we have on-duty pastors. We'll call somebody over there right away, and they'll minister to them and talk with them, but we're not going to put up with that crap. If then thinking, what are we up against? If this happens, then we will do what? Many situations can be managed on a case-by-case basis simply from church leadership. Hey, we got a tornado siren, although that should be drilled. There should be a plan at their level of, if we do get a tornado warning, what do we do? I mean, do we just continue on, or what's the right thing to do? That'll be really relevant if you get hit. I mean, it really will be. Fire, medical is also a part of safety and security. I mean, we deal with that every Sunday. Every Sunday. I need medical here or there. I need medical in the factory where the kids are. I need medical, it's not code 3. I need a code 3 ambulance and an AED in the South Commons. Heart attack, I mean, it happens to us. It's a 13,000 person city. So that's what you get. But what is your medical plan? And there should be something every service that we've identified who, do we have physicians? Do we have nurses that we've brought into the fold? Even though they may not have to do anything but attend first service, that is our medical person. We know they're here. We have a bag. We have an AED. We've got to have a plan for a medical emergency. Those are pretty easy on a case-by-case basis. Other situations demand specific pre-event guidance. So let me just run a few of these through you. What we know about church violence is it's going to be over before the cops get there. Preparation is everybody's responsibility, your local cops. I have no idea what, if anything, Poplar Bluff PD has done for you, but I'm confident if you call Danny Whiteley and say, we just want to make sure we understand what your people are trained to do if we get somebody in here with a gun, or if we get something, because you really do need to know. I mean, what will they do? Are they going to stay outside and call people out? Are they going to pull a Parkland, Florida? I'm not going in there. That could be dangerous, So they'll come out and talk to you for sure. Church leadership, and we're talking about that right now. That's why we're here. And then each individual, what are people in your congregation going to be thinking their role is for themselves, for their family, to be the hero? I mean, it's everyone's responsibility because the cops are not going to get there in time. Best practices are the organization meets with law enforcement. We have education, prepare, coordinate, planning in advance. What we would do with the cops if they got there, what our role would be. Do we lock the place down? Do we shelter in place? Do we evacuate? I mean, literally, if you had each of these rooms with kids, is that what's happening on a Sunday morning? And your teachers are back there with the kids, and they hear boom, 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 3 shots out in the atrium. What do? I'll give you my opinion. Those doors need to be beefed up to where they can throw a lock and shelter in place. That's it. What we know, I've studied very, very in-depth 332 mass shooting events. Unless the suspect is hunting a person, ex-wife, something like that, they will go past doors. If our goal is to exclude access to our people, then we want to make it hard for him or her to get to them. They know the cops are coming. They will seek out targets of opportunity. So sheltering in place is critical. How do you do that? Can they shut that door and lock it? And is it an easy door to kick? For very, very little cost, you can put solid core doors there that open out. Impossible to kick for a normal person. 3.5-inch screws and a deadbolt. And all the kids are safe. He's not going to mess around with those doors. He's going to come hunt you all. He'll hunt the people running around in front of him. And so we've got to have a plan for that, and we've got to implement the plan. Or we could just have the computer lock up, either one. Why don't y'all take a quick restroom break while I try to figure out what's going on with this presentation. So just a few minutes. We're going to quit at 8 o'clock. Absolutely positive. I got to fly to Orlando in the morning, so I'm driving back tonight. So let's just take 5. I'll figure this thing out, and we'll get right back to it.
I knew some of you other guys had to be hurt.
Brother Roy?
Good presentation.
I'm not sure. It's not so good right now. I'll tell you what, just for timing's sake, I can get through them all. It is 20. I'm fine. I'll get through them all. Yeah. Melissa just called me. Let me call her back. She doesn't usually bug me, so she knows I'm somewhere else. So call her and make sure she doesn't have a problem.
Becky.
Melissa. Becky never calls me.
Oh, she never called
She
me.
never calls me. Melissa, you're not. We just took timing was good. We just took a 5-minute break here at the church presentation. It was going fine. Good group. Everything good there?
Very high. Very high. And then it falls back.
Oh, yeah.
Let me talk to him.
Yeah, it's supposed to cool off.
Didn't we have a conversation about how that medicine was really good for you?
He's right outside of the river.
You do not give your mom a hard time. She's trying to help you.
The school was at.
That medicine is expensive. It costs a lot of money. And you have to do it. You do not want it. You don't want it. I had them when I was a little boy. I did not free medicine. My mom didn't have the money. So I had them for a long time. So your mom is helping you. And you need to appreciate that and not give her a hard time. It's very important you stand there and help her with that medicine. Now, you say yes, sir. You don't say yeah, man. You say yes, sir. Okay, you mind your mom. It's gonna.
Steve, I'm glad you videoed this because all these other guys that aren't here need to hear this.
Well, I'm not sure that's true, but whatever.
I think so. That was with Steve at Haiti once, and we were in this building, in one of these towns, and Steve said, you notice those guys looking at us out there? And I said, no, I really didn't notice. He said, Steve had a little pouch, like a gun pouch, and the guy, he said, the guy was pointing at me, he goes, just be careful on the way out, when we walk out, keep your eyes open.
There we Ross. There we thought we would shoot him,
Yeah.
and that was helpful.
Yeah.
I would love to have shot him, it didn't work out. I'm not keen on Haitian parasites. Been there too many times to put up with their stuff. Fellas, I want to get back at it. I know you all want to get out of here. I'm in no huge rush, but I do want to get done by 8 o'clock, like I said I would. And somehow my computer's back working again, so can something bad happen here? Again, I'm not trying to make you excessively vigilant. We know the statistics are very low about potential, but the reality is better than half of the violent situations happen in small towns, towns of less than 10,000 people. We can't assess risk unless we accept risk. And again, in some cases, I've had people that just, the risk is so low. We need to be prepared for the worst, although it's very unlikely to happen. But you're going to get the other stuff for sure. The day-to-day stuff, the drunk person, the doped up person, the mentally ill person, the domestic, you're going to get those. And so we just have to be prepared and plan for those things. Incidents occur inside the building about 1 out of 3 times. Think about that. Outside about 3 out of 4, or about 64% of the time. Parking lot is your single most important place to watch. And you might be thinking, oh gosh, in here, you've got to have someone watching the parking lot. Your greeters would do an excellent job of that. I would assume and hope that you limit entry access to those front doors only. And that way, they have to come by you, and we have to have a mindset of what have we done to prepare if our greeters or door people see a problem that they can secure the doors? How can we lock somebody out? So that's going to require some engineering. There's actually some relatively inexpensive, very, very high-tech film that you can put on your windows that will stop a handgun round. So you can keep the glass, but there's no way someone could kick through it, break through it. But your door people have to have a way that if they see a person sling, the Walmart that we had in Springfield here recently is a classic. If you see someone get out of a car, there were people in the parking lot watching this guy sling a rifle. That would be a point in time where if Walmart had the capability, they would throw a button and lock the doors. And well, I hate it for the people in the parking lot. This sounds really mercenary, but it's all about limiting access. And if you lock a person out, they may in fact take out their anger on people that are in their cars, but I'll give them those people instead of the entire congregation. It's all a matter of balancing the risk. They occur less than half the time during an event. They occur more than half the time in off hours. In other words, not during service times. And it's a single attack with 3 out of 4 times. Known triggers. Intimate partner violence. About 20% of the time. Personal conflict between 2 or more people that turns into a deadly force incident. About 30% of the time. A robbery. About 1 out of 5. Think about that. A lot of people do checks and stuff, but what percentage of the Sunday offering is cash? 10%? 10%? 20%? Would you even know? What percentage? I guarantee you this place is a way better take than any business in town on a Sunday, as far as cash. And that does not go unnoticed by robbers. Gang violence that bleeds over, 7.9%, random or other, about 23%. The key here is the top 3, interpersonal violence, personal conflict, and robberies are 7 out of 10. The key takeaway there is several of these things, like intimate partner violence, you'll have forecasting. You'll have someone tell you, my ex-husband is threatening to come here and kill me. That would be a guy you wouldn't want to let into your church. Plain and simple. Escalating current events, 2 opposing worldviews. I mentioned it earlier, I'll mention it again. Do not diminish the significance of a Bible teaching, preaching, growing church and being on the radar of demonic forces, in my opinion. Don't diminish that. And so evil could come here because you're doing things that the devil doesn't want you to do. I'm convinced that's true. And so, hey, we got good things going on here. That cuts both ways. It really does. All Christian churches have some risk. Your balance and stance on high-profile issues, abortion, political, same-sex marriage, biblical truth, educate and preach about anti-Christian religions or ideologies. Are you geographically located in a high crime area? Do you do things after dark? This is actually a checklist of our degree of exposure. So if you're in a high crime area or you do stuff at night, your risk is more.
How about this? Does your church have large cash offerings? Or is there a perception that your church has large cash offerings? Some churches still publicize in their bulletins weekly and sometimes even on their websites what their offering was the previous week. However, what they don't state is how much of that is checks.
Wow, that's interesting.
Demonic.
Come on now. Get back
How about
here.
this? Does your
Counseling ministry for marriages and families. Pastor left the meeting we had to do some premarital counseling. If you are bringing people in for marriage counseling, your risk level is dramatically higher than people that aren't doing that sort of thing. Counseling for addictions. We have a Living Free ministry. About a year and a half ago, we had a guy in our drug rehab addiction deal on a Thursday night get into a dispute with another guy, goes out to his car, comes back in with a 4-foot section of rebar and chases the guy around the meeting room with it. If you're doing these ministries, you are increasing your risk. Internal church tribulations. If you studied church shootings, you would be amazed at how many times someone in the congregation kills staff members because they're mad about something that's going on in the church. So what does that really mean? Well, what if pastor decides that we're going to educate people first, but then we're going to say for these reasons, we're going to follow state statute and post the door, we don't want you bringing a gun. When our Walmart guy walked in a week ago, he's been charged by our prosecutor, Dan Patterson. Dan is receiving death threats over that because he's suppressing the Second Amendment. You could have someone be very, very angry with the pastor for taking a position. That's the kind of thing you in security must be aware of. But here's a dilemma for all of us, even in law enforcement, the reality of what's called the normalcy bias, where when a scenario presents itself, if it could be bad or good, we tend to try to make it good. Joe threatened to kill the pastor over the gun deal. Oh, he's just talking. Joe's not really that kind of guy. And he's just blowing off steam. If he says he's going to kill the pastor, we make a police report and we ban him from the premises. And if we see him in the parking lot, we lock him out. And we call the cops. That's what we do with Joe. As church size increases, so do risks in all areas. You're a microcosm of society here. You get the good, the bad, and the ugly. And as you grow, you exponentially increase the chance of people coming in who could cause you grief. How would your church, how would you guys react to these situations? And I'm not going to beat all these to death, but you have a security program and you have someone watching the parking lot and a person gets out with a rifle bag on their back. These are the kind of things you literally need to talk about in advance. You're going to stop them. They're not going to walk into church with a rifle. How are you going to do that? Well, I'm not armed. That's a problem for you then. Doesn't mean you draw your gun, but you better be ready, and you're going to say, stop. I'm with Westside Security. You're not carrying that rifle bag in there. You got to speak up and stop them. And if they don't like it, they can leave. That's how that works. But we have to be thinking in our mind, what would we do? Person arrives open carrying a gun. Now, I'm not going to ask for anybody to answer, but I think right now today, that would be a coin flip of something, nothing. It's not illegal. It's under Missouri law. Well, actually, it's not illegal. It's an infraction. Churches only with permission, so do we stop them?
So what if someone came into your church like that?
They're not going to get off the parking lot. They're not going to get off the parking lot. I'm confident our door greeters would spot them, and they would be screaming bloody murder on the radio. Now, we don't stand at all the doors. And I've fought the battle with pastor and staff, and we lost it on limiting access. We've got 7 entry points to the church. And I don't have enough bodies to put a security person with our greeting staff on all 7. I lost the battle on the congregation. On the auditorium. I want everyone to come in a single door of the auditorium. I lost that battle. Way easier for us. We'd post 2 security people there with the greeters, and we'd be profiling everybody that came through those doors. We do it already with cameras. I'm not bragging, I'm just saying it's scalable. We have a $1 million fiber optic camera system that we watch in security. There's a person sitting in security with, I'll show you some pictures in just a second, big screen TVs that they can, with the exception of the bathrooms and the locker rooms, there is no place in that church I can't read over your shoulder whatever you're doing on your phone. Crystal clear. This is our Walmart guy. So that guy comes to church. 8 or 9 years ago when we first really begged and pleaded to do training for our greeting staff, I kind of threatened politely. I said, I'll tell you what, I guarantee you that if I put on my bib overalls and my work boots, I can come in on a Sunday morning with a chainsaw and walk right past the greeters. I mean, normalcy bias, he must cut wood for a living. He's afraid his saw is going to get stolen out of the bed of his truck. Do you realize what would happen with a person with a chainsaw? Anyway, that got some attention when I said, I'm going to test it. I'm going to bring a chainsaw in and see what happens. Okay. You guys can train the door greeters. So we started training them. Looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck. And see something, say something. And it's not perfect. I mean, I told the board about 2 years ago, in the face of all this, we had a guy, we're right there on Highway 65, a 4-lane. We had a vagrant come off the highway with a mattress on his back. And he starts right towards the front doors, and the door greeters alerted us, but they didn't stop him. I wasn't even seeing it. And when they keyed the mic and said, we've got a guy that looks homeless with a mattress on his back that just entered the doors at the 1-2 corner, I couldn't even see my key to the mic, and I said, security, when you find him, he's going to fight. You're going to have trouble with him. And in 3 minutes, we were on the floor fighting with him and took him off to jail. Just crazy. But most people don't bring a mattress in. And that unusual thing should be a clue. You look in the congregation while the service is going on. Someone takes a jacket off. They're wearing a gun on their hip. Now, you might say, what would you do at James River? I would not remove him during the service. We would plant someone right behind him. Why is that? If he breaks bad, I've got the entire congregation to deal with. If he's already in the sanctuary, I'm not going to fight with him. But we'll walk up, we'll remove the people from behind him, we'll sit right down behind him, armed policemen, and we're going to sit right there. Does that make sense? In the balance, it makes more sense to us to not take him on. What if he fights with us? Now we've got the gun in play. So it's the least worst option to just plant somebody right behind him that could really deal with him and then just hope for the best. We've had it happen. Not often, but we've had it happen. Pastor's preaching, protester stands up. Doesn't say a word. People around them are not going to like that. That's going to be your problem. It's the people wanting to help. They're going to think that's weird. So what do you do with someone who literally stands up to protest but doesn't say anything? And then next to her, someone stands up and begins to speak, to disrupt the service. You don't have the answer to this, and you shouldn't. This answer comes from above. This is something that pastor and the board have to discuss. What would be our response to a verbal disturbance of the service? I mean, we've got this down to a science at James River. We've had it happen. And pastor made it crystal clear. So I'll deal with them from the podium. He's rebuked them. Sit down and be quiet. And so Pastor, when is enough enough? Literally, this was the discussion several years ago, and his response was, you'll know when it's enough. When I've had enough, you'll know it. Never has happened. But we got to have a plan. What are we going to do with these kind of people? And that's going to come from above. A disturbance occurs outside, on the parking lot. You're watching it. Man and woman arguing. What do you do with that? What training, what plan do we have for a pastor to assist you to go out and counsel them? What do we do? Argument occurs in front of a child inside. So we've got, what's the significance? We've got a kid right in the middle of this thing. So it impacts how we deal with mom and dad. And what if kid wants to go with dad, but mom is the custodial parent? So we grab the kid by the hair and drag them over to mom? You see the dilemma we're facing here? This is so common. It is just, if you're not already having it, I can't believe it, that you're not having dust-ups with divorced people or things like that. Tug of war over the kid. Really, really, really dangerous. I mean, this is where you have to have a plan, because if, God forbid, you intervene and send that kid with the wrong parent, who's got papers, who's qualified to read the papers? This is a 911 call right here. You don't let him leave. I mean, you can't let, if she's squalling, he does not have custody, that's a parental kidnapping right in front of you. You can't let him take her out of there, and that may turn into a fight. So what if you're wrong? Well, you have to act on a reasonable appearance. If she's lying, if the husband looking right at you, no, I do have custody, here's what you say. You're not leaving. The police are on the way. You're not leaving with that child. If you two want adios, adios. That kid's not going anywhere until the police decide who that kid belongs with. And would I use physical force to prevent them from taking the kid? I would. How come? Because we know one of them's lying. One of them has custody, one doesn't, and we're not going to pull the Solomon thing. We're not going to split the kid in half. In reality, that doesn't work well. Autistic child with parent in the sanctuary disturbing the service. Or any other kid with their parents disrupting the service, and the parents are not doing anything about it. You just let it go on. I mean, we don't. We remove them. Pastor's decision. He'll give it a minute, and we don't self-initiate it. I'm in the A4 position. You'll see that I'm right down front. He's 3 seats away from me, or he's right in front of me on the podium. And it'll go on, it'll go on, it'll go on, and I'm just watching him. And then you look down and go, make the leave. And I key the radio, and an usher goes to him and says, time to go. Mm-hmm. And everybody's always gone, but he won't put up with that. I mean, that's that. Person stands up and challenges the pastor on a biblical issue. Happened a number of times over the years. Not frequently, but a number of times I've been present. He just goes toe-to-toe with them. You know, we're assembly, so we handle snakes and drink poison and stuff. We've had people speak in tongues. And there's a biblical way that happens, and there's a way that isn't biblical. I've been there twice when it's not happened the way the biblical reference is, and he rebukes them and he orders them to sit down. It's crazy. Now, likewise, I've been there on a number of occasions over the years, 3 or 4, where someone has stood up and spoken tongues, and then across the room somebody stands up and interprets it. It's amazing. I mean, it's like, holy smokes. But our pastor's decided that he'll go toe-to-toe with them. That's his decision. They are disturbing the peace, and if you choose to eject them, you could eject them, but that needs to come from above. The person approaches the pastor and begins to talk. Now, I don't know what, if any, plan you have about close security. Our pastor, we had it for a long time, and now for 3-4 years he doesn't want it. So he can wander wherever he wants. One of us will always follow him, but it's not within striking distance. We're 8, 10, 12 feet back. That's the way he wants it. And no disrespect, but we've all sat around, and when that first came down, I literally said, hey, he's a friend of mine, but if somebody attacks him, he's just dead. And we'll deal with the person. He doesn't want close security. That's his decision. But you have to decide what your rules are. During prayer for the sick, it's always 400 or 500 people come in lines up front every Sunday. He doesn't like people talking to him then. But he doesn't like me standing next to him like we used to do. If I'm standing 8, 9 feet away, I'm conscious of it. I'll see somebody come up to him. He doesn't like that. But he'll talk to him for a second. And I just look right at him, I just watch him. And at a point, he will make eye contact with me, and I know you're done now. That's the end of that. And so I'll grab, the front row is basically staffed with pastoral staff. So I'll grab the closest pastor, I'll grab him, come with me. Hey, how you doing? Justin Smith here, can I help you? And just stage left. And then a pastor will drag that person off and deal with them. So, Person approaches and begins to talk with pastor. Are we prejudiced? Are we profiling people? We are. We are. If I saw someone that looked like homeless or mentally ill, I would intervene immediately. Why would you do that? Because I know there's a statistical probability of that breaking bad more than a normal-looking person. Call it what you want. It's rational profiling. Does that make sense? I wouldn't run up there and tackle the guy, but I wouldn't wait for pastor to give me the eye. If it looked unusual, I would step right up and listen to the conversation. I'd be 2 feet away looking at him. And if he has enough, he'll look at me and I'll make the problem go away. A person enters your church in questionable attire. Modesty. What will you let someone wear? This is obviously a guy dressing in an odd way. What if you had a girl show up here dressing absolutely inappropriately? We've had it happen time and again. What do you do with that? We eject them. We'll engage them, we'll talk with them, but we can't have someone half naked sitting in the sanctuary. It disrupts the service. And above all else, pastor and staff have that thing choreographed. We've got 3 services. It literally runs by the second. If you're up front where I'm at looking back, there's a big screen and it is ticking. I know how long they pray for the sick. I know how long the worship service goes. I'm watching it by the second. And there's time to clear people in and clear people out. And we can't have the service disrupted. And so we'll deal with it. A man identifying as a woman is in the ladies' restroom. We've had that. What do? You guys got to figure that one out for yourself. What do? We offer them the male-female restroom. We have a family restroom. The last time we had it, and the guy declined and we ejected him. But if he'd have chosen to go into that restroom, he could have stayed. We would encourage people in that condition to come to church, but we're not going to have them disrupt the service. We're not going to have men in the women's bathroom. 2 men kissing in the bathroom. We've never had that in our bathroom, but you could have it. And it's going to be a political statement almost always. It's not really going to be 2 gay guys that are just really attracted to each other, but they're going to come. I mean, we're very, very conscious. We think this is our greatest threat, is groups trying to come and put us to the test on video and stuff and hopefully get us to be violent or something like that. We wouldn't tolerate this any more than we would tolerate a man and a woman displaying inappropriate excessive affection. We wouldn't tolerate it from either one of them. And again, like you, we're a private premise, and we would try to minister to them, get them to knock it off and go be seated, but if they didn't do that, then we would remove them. Statistically very, very rare in your world, but it actually happens quite often in policing. If you interact with someone depressed, suicidal, comes up with a gun and puts it to their head, this scenario in American policing is not hard to handle. If you point a gun at us, we're going to shoot you. But a gun to your head is a very tough challenge, and we deal with it in American policing quite often. If that person then goes for a walk, security's following them, do you shoot them? Do you not? There's people out there milling around. They got a gun to their head. They could go from here to here in a split second. What do? Here's all your people that have their guns. They decide to jump on board and help you. Now they're pointing guns at them. You can see how problematic that would be. There's no simple answer to this one, but you have to just think for a second. If, then, what will we do? This is a case I had in Orlando, a defense case. Policeman hears shots in a crowd. This was a tailgating party at University of Central Florida on the parking lot. He runs up, and this is what he sees. We know this because there's a guy with a cell phone taking a video behind him. He sees the guy in the green shirt with a gun to the head of the guy in front. You'll see in the next slide, there's a guy laying behind him holding his stomach. It looks like he's been shot, and he has been. That's all the officer sees. He then sees the guy with the gun to the head collapse to the ground and do this. He then sees the guy with the green shirt pointing the gun down there at him. The guy's unarmed. The guy in the green shirt appears to be about to shoot him. That's your Orlando cop right there, over his shoulder. The Orlando cop shoots the guy in the green shirt and kills him. The guy in the green shirt's a policeman, working underage drinking, acting not like a policeman. I was hired to defend the Orlando cop. We tried it in federal court, won the case, got a defense verdict. Because the officer was not acting like a police officer. Police officers don't point guns at people who are cowering on the ground, and we never know why all this happened. He's dead. But we know from witnesses that he got in a scuffle with this guy, draws his gun inappropriately. The guy didn't have a weapon. This guy's a friend of this guy. Just see some crazy man, his words, with a gun at my buddy. So I grab him from behind, and the guy turns the gun back and shoots me in the stomach. Policeman shows up, sees the suspect acting like a bad guy, about to shoot an unarmed guy on the ground, and he shoots and kills him. This is related to the fear I'm telling you about someone coming up with a gun in the sanctuary, and you don't know who's who in the zoo, and that's why it will be painful for some. But if pastor and the board decide to arm civilians, in my opinion, they have to put up signage to comply with Missouri law and say, folks, we have security without giving away all of our secrets, that are properly trained and prepared to deal with a threat. Understand that we are less effective if others are bringing guns into the sanctuary. It's not that we don't care about your Second Amendment right, it's that we want our security to not be confused and be effective. So what will actually happen? Some people will probably not bring the gun to church. Others will just be more discreet, but they'll bring it, and you're going to have to deal with it. The good news is, many of these people that are all big about carrying guns and stuff, when the rubber meets the road, they'll lay on the floor and hide. Very few people will really get in the fight. That's 332 cases I've reviewed. The Aurora theater shooting's a classic. There were 3 people, CCW carriers, that laid on the floor and cried like babies. So the good news is many of them won't get into play, but you only need one to screw up your day. And that's why we need to, from the podium and emails, communicate. We need your cooperation. It is about everyone's safety. And if there are other guns in play, in a moment of stress, our security people will be less able to deal with the problem. That's the best you can do.
So can I ask a question?
Please go right ahead.
Do you have your security that's not working on Sunday that is certified to carry as well?
They do. And they have to follow the same rule. This rule right here. 2 pouches, I'm grabbing on one. This rule right here. You can't carry a gun to church without this. So if for whatever reason it's gun time, this goes on their head to help us figure out who's who in the zoo. That make sense?
Just curious.
No, I agree. No, I get it. And that's a decision for you all to make. I've already talked about training the parking lot personnel. We're getting close to the end. I'm going to train them to look for baselines. So you're going to actually teach them to rationally profile. Now, a church your size, they'll know the majority of the people, but you're hopefully still going to have strangers come. But we need to look for aberrations, things that look different, and then what they should do about it. What am I talking about? It's last Sunday, and it's 99 degrees, and you've got a guy who you've never seen come in before wearing a trench coat. Yeah. That's a clue. Doesn't mean he's got a shotgun under his coat, but he sure could. And that's where we have to step up, and it's not comfortable for most civilians to confront somebody. Cops do it every day for a living. We're used to it, but you're asking a lot. Sir, can I talk to you? Why are you wearing that heavy coat? Nowadays, we just encourage people to speak plain English. It's 2019. You could have a shotgun under that coat, and I don't know you. So I'd like to look under your coat. Screw that. Bye. There's the door. It's our way or the highway. It's our congregation. Pastor says. And then we chuckle, you know. That's how it works. Things to look for: clothing that stands out, aggressive behavior, do they look familiar with the area, unnatural behavior, nervous behavior, does he or she have a concealed weapon? You can teach people to look for how people carry concealed. Most people carrying guns are not comfortable with it. 9 out of 10 people are right-handed. They tend to carry an appendix carry. So they'll walk, and they're constantly checking the status of the gun. They're not used to it being there. They'll hold it with their elbow. There's things people will do. I mean, I worked undercover from 85, 86, 87. I got really attuned at identifying people carrying guns because my life depended on it. And you'd be surprised how overt people who are carrying illegally or inappropriately, how they telegraph it. But we've got to teach people that kind of thing. Train ushers to deny access firmly but respectfully to those who are potentially unruly, intoxicated, or agitated. The size of your place here, I would absolutely have a security person that just stands in your atrium, just right there, as your greeters are greeting. And what they need to do if they see something is turn and go, "Hey, Roy," and then he just steps up and deals with it. I just want them to be eyes and ears. In a physical place your size, that'll work great for us. I mean, depending on where we are, it could be, I wouldn't say minutes. It could be a minute and a half where one of us could sprint to one of the doors. But you should have someone there pretty close. Have notification process from usher to security. Ushers keep cell phones for emergency notifications, 911, etc. Do you lock the church down? We talked about sheltering in place. How would you do it? Who could call it? Under what circumstance? Do we do anything for the congregation and or staff to drill a security lockdown? Does anybody know when the last child burned to death in a public school fire in the United States? Last time a kid was killed in a school fire. 1957. But every school religiously does fire drills. You're way more likely to have someone hurt in a school by an aggressive shooter, statistically rare still, way more than a fire, and schools are now beginning to do lockdown drills. Difficult with congregations, they come and go, absolutely imperative for your staff. Think about it, the most precious thing you got going on here is the kids in those rooms right there. You've got to be able to lock people out. And I don't know what the status are of your doors during the services, but the less access, the better. If you could keep them shut and locked, keep them shut and locked. You've got to have protocols, never have less than one, you can't have just one person in there with kids. If you don't believe that, just call the security director, retired trooper at Camp Kennecott, and he'll tell you how bad it can get. If you're familiar with Kennecott over in Branson, been there for 90 years, Christian camp that almost got completely bankrupted over 2 different staff sex scandals to where they now have a protocol. A staff person cannot be with a kid ever by themselves, but they've had to go through these protocols, and there's lessons to be learned from that. But we've got to understand how we would secure this place. Shelter in place is the hot setup. I mean, because the cops are coming, security's coming, we have to deny access, and statistically, it's for a relatively short period of time. In a truly deadly force incident, they're going to be hunting for people that are out in the open. So what do? Conceivably, could we lock the sanctuary? I mean, how would you engineer that if you saw someone getting out in the parking lot with a broad axe, that you could lock the door, lock the sanctuary, lock these rooms here? He may still get a few people, but he won't get access to everybody he wants. And that's the idea. We can't prevent everything from initiating, but we can mitigate the carnage, either through direct action or through limiting access. Assessing risk, we've already talked about that. I'm just going to try to get close to the end here. Pastoral security, it may go beyond the scope of what we're talking about today, but we just deal with it all the time. That's going to be philosophical from above. The pastors, in my experience, traditionally are pretty humble. I'm no better than anybody else. What we have to emphasize to them is that really the whole universe of worship revolves around them. They are not like everybody else. They are the focus. And so that's why it's appropriate. If you had anybody else that was a focus, someone else getting threats, you'd give them enhanced security, even if you're not getting threats. He is the focus of what happens here, and so it just makes sense. Establishing that do not cross lines. You've got to decide from an internal security perspective what you will let people do and what you will not let them do. So there's multiple tiers of security, beginning with the parking lot. And you're probably right now thinking, how many people do you think we have? Well, for your parking lot, it's one person. And it might be the atrium security person. who happen to just stand outside the door while the greeters are greeting, and they're greeting people. They're watching your parking lot. Not perfect, but I'll take it. It's eyes on the parking lot, and they're also available to the greeters if anything comes up. The way you're situated out front, I really like that. It's way better than my church. As far as control, it's way better. So, parking lot personnel, it really always begins there. Overtly or covertly, that's where they come from. And so, that is maybe the most important position in all of security, is stopping the threat before it gets in. And again, there are many cases you can research and find that they oftentimes shoot on the parking lot. They started out there. And if we just could have kept them out, it would have changed everything. Next to the greeters. So we're watching the parking lot. Now we're at the doors. And so we're filtering that second layer. Then ushers. Depending on how you're structured, once they get in, who then assesses them as they are helped to where they're going to be seated? We have lots of people that are assigned, not security, but ushers, who are standing on all the rows, they're looking at people, and as we begin to fill up before service, they help fill seats, and they are all taught the same way. They are looking for things to give us a heads up. It's a holistic approach to the whole place. That is heavily weighted on what I call close protection and react. If the pastor's the focus, we've got these various filters to get to the front. But at the front, things get really weighty for us. And pastor's not asking for that. It's just where the focus of everything is. And we do have people that have run to the stage, to the podium. None of them have been assaultive or aggressive, but we've taken them down. We've stopped them. I had a lady 2 years ago at Easter that I took down that my wife didn't even notice it in the way you would think. I thought it looked pretty bad, but we watched it on video because it's all recorded in there. And I was able to get her to a pastor real quick, but I mean, she just felt moved to come throw herself down there in front. And so here's just a quick download for us. This is Sunday. I just started shooting pictures. This is the first service, beginning of the briefing. This would have been, there's 61 of us there. There'd have been 20 plus there for the first service in that meeting. Others were already outside in the parking lot and stuff. So these are the screens that we can watch anything on with the joystick. And we're going through now persons of interest. And so here's Matthew Green. This was the guy Monday that we arrested in our shower facility. That's his vehicle. Here's what he looks like. He's banned from the premises. And most people are shooting pictures of that kind of stuff. Something that may never cross your mind, but it's really relevant, is the privacy aspect of this. So what if we have a person who's been arrested for sodomy of his own kids, and he's out on bond? And we just shake our heads, but generally pastoral staff will allow them to attend. There's all kinds of rules, like we'll make them go to a different campus. But if we're taking pictures of that, what if I share that with people? Do you understand the implications? And a lot of these aren't any, well, okay, he's been arrested. A lot of these aren't that way. Just real quick, I made these out of order. This is a color today for bag checks is red. And he's showing this little red piping that will attach to the person's bag. So the next time you see that bag, you know it's been checked. But you could have something else. Here's Joe Green. He and his wife are in counseling. She's confided in confidence to counseling staff that he's threatening to kill her. Just her word against his, but now we all know that. And so, do you get the concern, the privacy issues? Everybody that's in security, they have to absolutely be sworn to absolute secrecy. We've never had it blow up on us, but it's not if, but when. It's going to happen. And we're vulnerable there. We could, if we facilitate spreading a rumor around about a guy, you know, the wife said in counseling that she believes he's sexually assaulting their 13-year-old daughter, and that somehow got out from us, that'd be a big deal. So you'll have to be thinking about policy and protocol for what you share. all of us in security have got, I've got all the positions mapped out. I know where people are inside the sanctuary, the different radio channels. I've got to call medical, etc. I've got key fobs to get into electric locks. I've got keys, pass keys for the hard locks. We have to be able to get into stuff, and it's just, when you're almost 400,000 square feet, it is crazy but that's what you all wear, this 10-pound thing around your neck with all these keys and stuff. I'm A4 right here, A3, A2, A1. Got a person on stage dressed in black. They don't look like Darth Vader. They just have to wear like dark jeans and a dark shirt. If I'm facing pastor, they sit on the corner of the stage right in front of the curtains. And they are designed to be the last on a runner. We all know, if a person gets up from row 2 or 3, they'll get by me. They'll get by both of us. They just will. But that's the person to intervene there, but also eyes always looking back to try to warn you. I cannot tell you, it's probably hundreds of times I've been sitting there and I just hear over the radio, A4 on your right, and I look and there's someone right there. The stage guy's warning me, someone's got up there coming. Otherwise, I'm just doing this kind of stuff all the time. And about every 10 seconds, I kind of look, and then I'll look back to the row behind where pastor's wife and stuff is sitting, because that's kind of where the focus is, I'm 3 minutes late. First question, are we going to have a security program? Is it worth, in the grand scheme of things, the time and trouble that comes with it? That's for staff. I think you're at that point where you're going to do that. But there are reasons to really consider, okay, and then how do we scale it? What is our primary focus? You've got to figure all that out. If yes, what will it look like? Law enforcement, volunteer, uniform, armed. An off-duty cop is actually not that expensive. I'm not encouraging it, but a lot of churches are doing that now. Like I said, I've done it now. We've got 12 every service. So, deterrent, on scene, when you weigh I don't even know, but I'd be stunned if a Poplar Bluff cop cost you more than $15 an hour. I may be wrong. $48 an hour in Springfield, but I know what I made when I worked here. Maybe 20. So if you figured, how many services you running? 2 on Sunday? So from what time to what time?
9 to 2.
9 to noon. 4-hour minimum costs you $80. Might be the best $80 you've ever spent in your lifetime. And what does he or she do? You can start with them on the parking lot in their car, just watching. Are you willing to spend the time and money to have a good program? You have to have a pre-incident plan and train and prep accordingly. What are we up against? And what will we set in motion to deal with it? Our security focus must be based on things we potentially might face. What are we really up against? And remember, it's frequency and impact. Well, you already told me it's 1 in 6.5 million on a shooter. Why would we even raise a hand on that? Go find anybody who's been involved in a shooting and tell them 1.65 million, and they're going to go, I won the lottery, right? It happens. So you have to look at impact as well. Confirm support from church leadership. That's why I was really glad to have the meeting with the board, because at the end of the day, if pastor and the board aren't on board, you guys are done. That's it. It ends right there. Do a baseline readiness evaluation. All hazards, tornado, fire, medical, security. What are we up against, and are we ready for any of it? Start with what you have and where you are. You've got a group that's interested, and that's a good start. But beyond that, no policies, no real plans. You've got to start, you got to run or crawl before you run. Keep it simple, and you may see a lot of stuff I've talked about today and think it's complex. It's really not. Keep the worship mission at the forefront. It's ministry first, and then facilitating that in a polite, respectful way, but in a firm way. To some degree, I don't have much tolerance for people who don't respect our rules. And if our rules are, you don't bring a gun in here, then you can frigging leave. That's it. And I am tolerant, and I can extend grace, but willful disobedience doesn't fly well with me. We're all under authority. And the last time I checked, the pastor is the head of this church. And if you don't like what he says, just go somewhere else. But don't stay here and cause trouble. And I'll give John a little credit for one thing. We've got a lot of people that come to our church. He doesn't weep over any that leave. If you're not on board, adios. And somehow we just keep growing by the thousands. Somehow it's working for him. And I'm going to brag, we gave $4.3 million to missions last year. #1 missions church in the Assembly worldwide. So we've got a big ministry. We've got big staff. We've got big stuff that sometimes bothers me that it's so big and Hollywood-ish and all that. But at the end of the day, I know this because we actually have a campaign to build out our Joplin office. And he just gave the stats at Sunday service. Since James River opened in 1993, we have had 60,000 people accept Christ. And he actually showed, I'm kind of a naysayer. Roy knows this. We've talked about some of the things that I've struggled with at James River, how over the top we are in some areas. But Pastor turned me on this recent campaign by showing the direct relationship to salvations and baptisms to when we have done expansions and upgrades. And so we're on board. My wife and I are going to contribute above our tithe to the Joplin campus. And I was really, I told Becky, yeah, I'll give to the Joplin campus, but I'm not really wanting to give to any more upgrades here or West Campus or North Campus. But he actually got up there and gave, they did 7 dessert meetings with what they consider their so-called leaders over the different groups. And then those leaders would point to people in their groups that people listen to. So they brought in about 1,000 people in 7 meetings to hear the long spiel. And then he gave a condensed version Saturday or Sunday. And in the end, it made sense to me. It did. So anyway, keep it simple. Keep it legal. We're all under authority from the pastor or from the law. Know your insurance agent and policies. I mean, you want to be in a position where you know you're adequately covered and protected. Network with your community, people around you as well as law enforcement, the fire service, ambulance crews. Know who you're actually dealing with. Train and drill. Develop policies and procedures. I'm done. 9 minutes late, I apologize. Phone number, email address, if easy to find through Roy. If there's anything I could do for y'all in the future, let me know. If you get this thing up and running and you have some people who are put in a leadership role over security, you're more than welcome to come to any service we have. Briefing is 1 hour before the service for all 3 services at all 3 campuses in Springfield, 2 services in Joplin now. We've only been open for 8 months, 9 months in Joplin. 940 people in 9 months. And it's growing, but they only do 2 services there. So you're welcome to come, watch how we do business. It's not perfect, but it's as well-oiled a machine as something as big and cumbersome as we can be. And you're also welcome to any of our digital policies and stuff like that kind of explain why we do what we do and all that to say. I appreciate your time and patience. Any questions, confusion? You're going to laugh at this, Roy, but I want you to take a picture of you standing up here on the plate one minute. Like I'm acting like I'm doing something. With my phone. Any questions or concerns or comments that come up?
Appreciate it, Kevin.
Yes, so, happy to be here. It's a issue that's near and dear to my heart. That's up one frame, so it's not just a vanity shot there. But nowadays people are very, very attuned to risk and danger and taking their families places, and for you all to take a couple steps forward to cause them to have a greater level of comfort without it looking like a jail is a good thing. And being welcoming is important, but also making them as safe as you can. So, have a good evening. Call me if I can help you.
Thank you.
Thank you again for your time. Thank you.